I think it's important to have that conversation, that open internal dialogue, right? Like as you look at things and you maybe finish a tough week, a tough day, and you reconcile, and your life has to be meaningful. It has to have meaning. If you hate doing what you do, even if it's very lucrative, you should really have that dialogue open with self-reflecting and figuring out how to actually live life instead of just trying to survive.
Today we had Nick Rastopchin on the Bigger Life podcast. He taught us a lot about how to stay up to date on the real estate market, how that world works. I think that's going to be really critical for you to hear. We talked about AI and how it's going to disrupt all of our businesses, how to stay ahead with your content, the do's and don'ts of content, and most of all, how to keep your priorities in line and what the bigger life really means to him. So with that, enjoy today's episode. Okay, sweet. Welcome back to the Bigger Life podcast. We're here at our first episode in our home studio with Nick Rastopchin. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for making it happen, man. I've known Nick for a very long time. He's been a good friend, and we've done business a couple different ways. So always admired him and how he carries himself. And today we're going to get into a lot of that. But first, before we even get into that, I want to hear, we haven't caught up in a while. What are you working on right now that's exciting, kind of in your face?
Life. Wow. Surviving, raising a 3-year-old. I mean, you're dealing with similar things.
Recently turned 3, right?
Recently turned 3. She just turned 3 in March, and our daughter is keeping Michonne and I super busy. And the dynamics of everything, and again, I'm preaching to the choir. You're back on Turks. Like, we don't rely on babysitters, so like just the adjustment of the business and the dynamic of like we do everything together, but at the same time, this is where Michonne and I kind of split our efforts, where we don't believe in babysitters, and I'm not 100% positive on, like, I'm a product of public schools, and look at me, but things have changed in the last 30 years.
Yep.
So this is like the next big dilemma on what to do. And, fortunately enough, like, we live in such a great place where so many of our clients are coming here and they're like, dude, public schools in Washington County are what they used to be and far better than what they are everywhere else in the country. But it's all subject to change. I'll be pessimistic on that topic, but yeah, so really that's the big thing right now, is raising a child and keeping up with a 24/7 business.
Wow. I mean, for the audience who might not know, I've always known Nick and his wife as basically like as much of a tag team 1-2 punch husband-wife real estate professional team as there is, right? You guys, I mean, tell us a little bit about what your business was like before your daughter came along, and I want to get into more like the changes that have had to take place.
For sure, yeah. No, and thank you for all the words of praise. My head's already so big I could barely make it through his doorway. So we've been in business together for the last, it's been 9 years, going on 10.
And is that as long as you've been married?
Yeah, pretty much as long as I've been married. So when we got married, I came from background in corporate America. I managed a bunch of Verizon wireless stores, and it was a great foundation prior to getting into real estate, because if you could run any business the way a Fortune 15 company runs a business, you'll have a greater appreciation for process and the systems.
Yeah.
And just the consistency that kind of removes the human factor. Verizon's credo was, well, they've changed their credo a number of times, but they said whatever, I'll butcher it now, but what we did today was good for today. Tomorrow we'll do better. And I feel like as you shift gears and get into owning your own business, the funny lie that everybody sells you on is the idea of having more time to live life.
Yeah.
The work-life balance, I think it's kind of an illusion. If you're taking things to the next level and you're scaling, the balance, that line kind of gets erased. So and this is pre-baby, pre-child business where you could actually like really dedicate 100% of yourself to your clients and your business.
Yes.
And then once you bring a life into this world, you start to realize that all that my daughter sees is me staring at my phone or being on my phone or answering calls. So that's where the dynamic really starts to have to come back. But having that foundation and having that background really lets you slave drive yourself a little more when appropriate, and actually trying to find that balance to be there for your family when they need you. And they need you just as much as your business, if not more.
Oh, 100%. Family first is like most people live by that, but not everyone says they live by it, but it's a different thing to go ahead and back it up.
Right.
Real estate professionals, that is one of the toughest businesses. I mean, it's a great cash cow, obviously. Like it can be, but one of the biggest things is it's demanding on the face of the company. Also, in a lot of cases, has to do a lot of the work. How did you and your wife? You talked about systems and processes. How did you guys divide labor before you had your baby? Like, what was that like?
It was kind of chaos, and the dynamic that I feel that was really good for us. So we've had our YouTube channel established long before a lot of other people in our area, in our industry, jumped into it.
Yes.
And a lot of our clients will start watching our videos years prior to making that decision. So then it kind of becomes a full experience, and we're just as excited about it as they are. And they say, Nick, Michonne, we would love to get together with both of you, and let's get together for lunch, and we'll discuss our needs, and we'll go forward. And we're super excited to work with both of you. So usually all of our clients get touched by both Michonne and I, and our personalities are so different. Coming from the background, Michonne comes from medical industry.
Okay.
Before I convinced her to jump into real estate, and her personality is very soft, very caring. In our relationship, I have never met anybody that disliked my wife for who she is. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to be liked by everybody. My personality tends to be either love me or hate me.
More polarizing.
Before I even open my mouth, some people just dislike me just because... And it's fine. I think it's okay to be polarizing. Not necessarily always the best thing for business, just because you want to be liked by as many as possible.
Yeah.
And Michonne's personality is impossible not to like. So I think that helps a lot of our clients, knowing that they could talk to Michonne or talk to Nick, but they ultimately have both of us in their corner. Is one of the challenges that we're now finally like kind of putting a hard stop to it. Is early on, people are like, well, we see you had a baby. We've been following you for like 3 years now. Please bring her to meet with us. And at first, and this is still my final stance on it, I was like, this is so unprofessional. Like, I think it's great to bring your kids to work.
Yeah.
But if you're making a really big decision, like for one, you're about to change your whole life. You're about to change states. You're maybe in a transitional state of your life, because a lot of our clientele are people that are finally retiring and they're getting ready to live their life. So they're walking away from what they used to do for a living. They're walking away from everybody they knew, and they're just stepping into this whole new environment.
Yeah.
So I think their priorities are far more important, even though they say that we'd like to meet the whole family. Trying to chase a 3-year-old around while you're having a conversation about somebody's life-changing moment is not good. Like, and our clients are so awesome. They always tell us, look, we love it, we welcome it, but we've kind of had to put a hard stop to that. So now it's pretty challenging to meet with clients if they want to meet both of us. So
yeah,
often I'm the face of the company, even though Michonne's got a better looking face. So I'm out in the field, and I get to rub shoulders and be belly to belly with all of our clients while Michonne's behind the scenes. And there's a lot of work that goes into making things come together, behind the scenes while I'm out and about, being able to meet with people and show them houses or go out on listing appointments and bring their houses to market.
Yeah. And I think that's natural and normal. I mean, just the fact that you guys managed a husband-wife business for close to a decade is pretty impressive. Like, me and my wife, we have I'd say a 10 out of 10 marriage, but we don't, like, our being business partners would be probably too much for us. Like that would probably not be a good thing for us. I think we're better as husband and wife, you know?
Think so?
So I think, with you guys, like that's impressive that you pulled it off, and it makes a lot of sense that you guys are both, you're picking up a lot of stuff in the field, and she's also, making sacrifices being with the daughter, and I'm sure you get to play a little bit more time at home now too.
Yeah,
So
I think you guys are probably not giving yourselves enough credit. It's funny that this is actually like one of the first things that people say, and I know that you and Lauren do a lot of stuff together and
yeah.
kind of separate the business, but I think you'd be shocked. I find that the foundation of the relationship that you have with your wife, um, both men and women have told me this before. They're like, if I was in business with my wife or with my husband, there's no way that the marriage would last just because we would constantly argue and fight. And I never pass judgment on that aspect, but I feel like if your relationship with your significant other is strong enough to where no matter what, you will be together,
Yeah.
you tend to find a way to make that work, and you're a cohesive unit, you're a team. And in real estate in particular, so everybody tries to scale and grow a team and get a bunch of agents to, in any business outside of real estate, it's hard to find somebody that's equally as invested into your business and the success of your company as somebody that shares a bank account. You know,
I like that.
you could try to develop your employees, sell them on a dream of ownership in the company. At the end of the day, they just punch out and they don't care about your business. There could be some employees that are great and they're motivated in their growth. But at the end of the day, it's not, if your business fails, they're not ever going to be as concerned about it as somebody that owns it. Like it's your baby, it's your product.
Yeah.
So having these family teams, and you see it very often in real estate, where it's husband and wife, mother and son.
Yes.
It's, if it stays in the family, I feel like that's what it takes to be successful. And if the family unit is cohesive enough, the relationship is strong enough, it's very, very doable.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you checked me on that, because I'm sure if we chose to go into business together, I'm sure it would go well because we would find the right roles for each other and stuff. I just, like I think we had this experience. I don't know if you remember, my wife did protein cookies for a while. And we just got to the point when my daughter was born, and my daughter's 6 months behind yours. So we just got to that point where it's like, look, like this has been going good. It's at this kind of tipping point where it's like we either invest more time and money into it and it will work, or we kind of like close the chapter, focus on our kid, and just kind of move on. So I think you're right. We could do it. And we do it strong of a marriage. It's just like sometimes it's a really tough decision, even before you have kids, but especially with your daughter now. So I like that perspective. I think it is interesting to point out that you guys provide your clients with a full range of like the feminine, the masculine. So whatever a client feels comfortable talking, no, whoever they feel comfortable talking to or trusting, like you kind of have it covered.
It's funny. I often get pulled into the transaction because I could usually tell we engage with a new client, and they have the option. So whenever they watch videos that we do together on our YouTube channel, my contact information is there. Michonne's contact information is there. And I don't want to disqualify anybody if they're watching this and now they're like, Nick, I was going to call you, but now I won't. But statistically speaking, if the client has kind of a softer personality, they usually reach out to Michonne.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes as you go to battle, like we never turn things into a battle, but sometimes it feels like it, where the buyers are negotiating with the sellers and they're like, we really need for somebody to show up and tell these people what's up.
Yeah.
And they're like, Sean, can we get Nick involved? We feel like we need for him to talk to
You
somebody.
an enforcer.
I'm kind of the enforcer. And sometimes people will just reach out to me directly. They still love working with Michonne, but somebody with a stronger, like, we just need results right away type personality, those are the clientele that usually just call me directly, and then we just start working. But yeah, it's a funny dynamic being able to offset. I think we both combine our strengths, and Michonne helps people get past the abrasive part of Nick.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious to see what you've seen in this market. In storage, we're seeing it turn into a buyer's market. And so it's been really beneficial to our company, but I see in residential real estate and commercial, like, a lot more strain on buyers and sellers because sellers are having to decide if they're gonna hold out or give in, basically, right now. What are you seeing?
That's a very fair statement. I think that the market has officially flipped in Southern Utah. It shifted, and we're seeing this day in and day out. The sellers that are detached from the outcome to a sense of we're coming off such a strong market where you could pretty much just name your number as a seller, hold out long enough, and somebody will bring you that offer. So the sellers that have that attachment to a number are typically losing in this market, because what happens is if that number happens to be unrealistic based on what the market brings, and it's an analogy of catching a falling knife. So if you think your house is worth X amount of dollars, but the market doesn't bring that outcome, the market is continuing to get slightly softer as the high prices and high interest rates persist. It's also affecting other markets, because I would say with our clients, about 80% of buyers are coming from outside the state.
Right.
And historically, California, Washington, Oregon, all of these places, like especially the California market, like SoCal market, is detached from reality because there's foreign cash that gets piped into that market, or there are people that are moving around, and it doesn't seem to matter. $2 million plus properties get listed. Within one weekend, they got an open house, 30 showings, and 5 offers.
We're still today, you're saying?
Still today, but not to the degree that it used to happen. So we have a client that is now getting ready to make their offer, and that was the expectation. They had 2 weekends, 2 open houses. Everybody shows up, nobody makes an offer. So California market, as well as some of the other Pacific West markets, are more attached to people either pulling equity. Well, first of all, no new wealth is really created in terms of real estate. People who are buying higher end houses are transferring equity from other markets, and it's getting tougher to liquefy that equity in other markets. So if it's taking longer to sell somewhere else, and it's taking the seller, they may have all of the desire to be right here in Southern Utah, but they can't until there's a big liquidity. So that creates a bigger gap, and then things are starting to sit in the market a little bit longer. And there's also the uncertainty. There are people that are starting to, and there's so much noise in the media. So people try to often play the broker, like the stockbroker, when buying their personal residence, like their primary residence. And the confusion around that is a lot of people think that anytime they buy a piece of real estate, it's an asset, when in fact your primary residence is a liability.
That's a good point.
In order for it to be an asset, it would have to produce income. And a lot of people say, well, my equity, I got $1 million in equity. But that equity isn't doing anything for you unless you're actively tapping into it. It's just sitting there. So a lot of people have this weird attachment to making the right move when they buy. In reality, in my almost 10-year career, the best time to buy was always in the past. We haven't seen an adjustment. Now, there are exceptions, and I just looked at this with one of my clients recently. If you were buying an Airbnb property right here in Southern Utah 3 years ago, we helped them sell in this particular townhome. It's a townhome that's zoned for short-term rentals. We sold it for $780,000 in 2021.
Okay. At the peak.
At the peak.
Yeah.
And that was 2022 actually. So I keep forgetting that we're in 25. So in 2022, the peak was starting to kind of
Q1
was starting to come off, right? So that property sold for $780,000. And I looked at 3 comparables in that same subdivision. They're selling now in like the 530s, almost $250,000.
Wow. Yeah.
And there are a lot more. This is an isolated scenario to just short-term rentals. I think that's isolated to that product, because a lot of people looked at these Airbnb properties like the road will never end, the demand will continue. So now with weaker economy, fewer people taking vacations, and more market saturation, that's like a separate force that's affecting that market. And And real estate is local. So a lot of people that are making these bets from other states and other areas and they're watching the market, you need to identify who is the expert in your market if you're looking to engage, because you could be looking at yesterday's numbers and thinking that, 530 is way better than 780 and you're going to buy this house and now is the signal to buy. And it might be still a terrible investment just based on all the other market factors.
Yeah.
Now, if you step away from the investment products and look at the residential side of things, we're seeing a lot more supply. Like we're seeing pre-pandemic levels of inventory in terms of the inventory that's on the market. As we work with sellers and builders, there's also, I don't want to say almost as much, but there's almost as much phantom inventory. A lot of the builders are uncertain about what the future brings. So they're continuing to pull permits, they're continuing to build, but they don't know what the tariffs are going to bring. They don't know if the rates are going to drop. So if you're sitting,
Probably not.
yeah, like if you're sitting on a $2 million plus spec house or in a $1 million plus spec house, even a 10 to 15% sway in what the pricing is going to do can have a huge effect on your margins.
Yeah.
And those that are comfortable with keeping things off market, just bring them to market as these homes get fully finished, or even kind of hold out. So like I could at any point call a number of builders and say, hey, do you have like 10 to 15 houses to choose from? And that's what's happening right now. So if you're a seller thinking about selling in this market, you really have to be in tune with what the market is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Detach your thoughts from what you think your house is worth and have enough trust in the professional that's helping you based on conclusive market data. I could show you where the trajectory would be when you price your house, and it could be gone in the shortest period of time possible. And this is where a lot of sellers actually have the fear of, well, what if I underprice it? I don't want to give it away. Realistically, there are so many buyers on the sidelines that are waiting for a deal to come.
Yeah.
I can pretty much assure you that it's impossible to underprice a house. In fact, if you intentionally try to underprice it, you will likely get multiple offers, and the market will bring essentially what the market would bring.
Yeah.
There's a market value for every property, and real estate agents are not magicians, but a lot of us, some of us, that's a whole nother topic, but some of us are very effective at what we do. And if you have the right professional in your corner and you are willing to work with them and you're willing to let them lead you through that project, you'll be successful. Buyers, if you're holding out and waiting, I'll tell you that right now, average property sells about 4 to 5%, like based on the numbers that we pull from MLS, 4 to 5% below asking. This is your list versus close ratio.
Yeah.
And most sellers now are pretty excited to see an offer and entertain it, and they're willing to accommodate for things like credits towards closing costs, repairs, other accommodations, contingent offers. It's pretty good to be a buyer in this market.
Oh yeah. 100%. I love it. And I think buyers, in storage, we're having a frenzy, right? Like people, we don't know if we're at the bottom. Like I'm not saying that we're at the blood in the streets valley of the graph yet, but I like buying all the way down. I think on the residential side, like you hit a lot of key points. Go off of data. Don't go off of like emotions or I have this number stuck in my head, because that will cost you. We also, I don't know, do you have many clients who sell with creative finance?
We've ran into that, and I'm actually in the process of early stages of trying to make a deal work on one of kind of a unique scenario where the seller put the home in the market and it's an unfinished house. So it doesn't have a certificate of occupancy. They started building, they ran out of money.
Yeah.
And I can't disclose too many details of this, but this is going to fall into the creative financing territory with a couple of moving parts. So great opportunity for the buyer. This is everything they ever wanted. Outside, technically, if the home was completed and everything was great, the price point on that home would be outside of what the seller can or the buyer can qualify for. However, the seller has a hard money lender that is willing to give them the funding to finish the property and get it to a certificate of occupancy so that the buyer can come in with a conventional loan
Yeah.
that they can afford. But it takes two to tango in this scenario. So the only way the hard money lender will loan them the rest of the funds is if they have a solid concrete in place for the future buyer.
The contract. Yeah.
Right. So they have to be under contract for the sale of the property before the hard money lender gives them any more money.
Basically, two people have to work with the hard money lender, which for me is like exciting, right? Because you, as the seller, you give your buyer more buying power, and as the buyer, you basically allow yourself to get the terms that you need, right? And so, I mean, selling, like, we bought on the buy side and the sell side with creative finance, and it unlocks so much. And I hope that there's enough pain in the market for sellers that they'll do that. And I hope that buyers are smart enough to recognize when a seller is stuck on something and bring that up. So I love it. I want to hit more on your content strategy. So you hinted at the fact that you were creating content years before everybody else jumped on the bandwagon. That is 100% true. You guys were creating YouTube videos and working on that before real estate professionals were even aware of the impact that could have. And of course, everyone's following now, but was that like your vision? Was that your wife? Like, how did that come to be? And why did you believe that at the time?
It was kind of interesting. So when I first moved to St. George 10 years ago, I was working for Verizon Wireless, and I lived in North Carolina. Southeast of the country is a very interesting place. I know a lot of people love living in North Carolina. The southeast of the country in general, it's a great experience. I'm glad that I got to experience it after I lived in the Midwest. I lived in Chicago before I moved to North Carolina. And after 4 years of living in a military town as a civilian.
You mind if I ask what city?
Fayetteville, North Carolina. Fort Bragg, 82nd. If anybody ever tells you about that being a great place to go on vacation, they're sarcastic. The community is about 250,000 people. Great folks. Majority of my friends were stationed there. So imagine there's a saying about civilians in Fayetteville, North Carolina. They're either brought there or left there. So it's a huge military base, airborne 82nd. And throughout that area, there are also like special forces and all sorts of other bases that.
How far is it from Lejeune?
I think pretty far.
Okay. Opposite sides of the state.
Opposite sides of the state. It's a little bit more. It's like in the Raleigh Triangle.
Okay.
It's 80 miles inland from the ocean. And anyway, I came to a point where I'm like, man, I got to get out of here. So I'm at work looking at options to relocate. And one of my friends that was working for the company said, Nick, you need to come to Vegas. We've got an opportunity for you here in Vegas. Started applying for positions, and Vegas didn't work out. So there was an opening in St. George, and I knew nothing about Utah. Like not even the Mormon stereotypes.
You didn't know any of that?
I didn't know any of that. Like I've never been to Utah before. And some of my coworkers and people I knew started cracking jokes about multiple wives. I'm like, that sounds like a pretty weird, ignorant statement. I had zero knowledge about the LDS or the FLDS religion or any of it. I just knew that it was a beautiful state. So I turned to YouTube, and there was nothing. Like,
wow.
When I first moved here, like 10, almost 11 years ago, there were a couple of videos of kids cliff diving into Sand Hollow.
Yeah.
But no content around the lines of like what it's like to actually live here. And I figured that in any kind of relocation niche, and of course, the great migration of the pandemic, as people started to go to places where they could have a better quality of life unmasked.
This was probably the best place to be.
This was the best place to be because we observed it for about 2 weeks collectively. And then everybody was like, okay, well,
people were getting fired up. If you remember that time, like, yeah, my wife was like about to go to fist fight with stewardess, and people were like protesting at the schools. Like, it was awesome.
It was pretty intense. I've heard so many stories, so many insane stories from our clients that were moving here about what it was like. And you know, it really put things in perspective about living in a state where, you know, I still think California is a beautiful place, beautiful climate.
Don't say too many negative things about California.
You know, there are enough. Whenever I talk to my mom lives in Wisconsin. I was talking to her about California this morning, and she's like, "Yeah, if I could, I'd live there." Like, I don't think you would like really enjoy it once you face the challenges. Like, you know, what is it like to pay 50 grand in property taxes and not have water and a fire hydrant?
Yeah.
It's a whole another can of worms. But
Yeah.
a lot of people around 2020 started, like 2019, 2020, they were, yeah, it's like boiling a frog, right? Like if you slowly turn up the heat, it takes longer for the frog to realize that the water is getting hot. And that was happening to a lot of people that lived in such a beautiful state with such broken policy. And the whole, I don't know what to refer to it. I guess pandemic is what people call it. That kind of exemplified to people that a lot of the things that they enjoy doing can be taken away from them. And I think it got the people to start going on the internet and just really researching what it's like to live in other places. So a lot of our content strategy was around that, just letting people know what this area has to offer and what it's like to live here, the pros, the cons, all of these things. And as of late, it seems like a lot more agents and agents, lenders, everybody in the industry, as the things slowed down, everybody's trying to search for business and bring content. And being a content creator is a pretty difficult task. You know, it's there's not one way to do it. I think the best part about it is that some people might absolutely hate my content, but love somebody else's content and vice versa. So you get to connect with people before you ever even talk to them. They have a preconceived feeling about you based on the things that they saw on video, because you get to present yourself and present the area, and people are like, love the area, can't stand working with you. And it's kind of funny. I don't know, maybe I'm being too critical, but I'm a human. You know, whenever I look at other areas, and we've bought real estate in other states, and I've turned to YouTube and I've looked at things, and everybody, you know, first impression is everything.
Yeah.
So
you're only as good as you can scale, and social media content's like how people scale.
Yeah. And I love the fact that it gives you an opportunity to really find your tribe. You know, once you have 1,000 people that believe in your business or your product, the sky is the limit, right? Like, you could be an artist that needs to find a following of 1,000 people. Not my words. I've seen it said by somebody way smarter than me, but essentially it's a true concept.
Yeah.
Once you have 1,000 followers, then at that point, it just scales because people talk to other people and you get referral business and it grows into this beautiful thing. But I think having authenticity and having your own unique way of creating content and presenting things in a pretty noisy marketplace, because everybody has a voice because of the internet, and it's great. I think that having access to all that information really benefits the consumers because they get to see multiple points of view on the same matter.
Yeah.
And they will always find somebody that usually is in line with what they believe.
They agree with them on most things.
Right.
Yeah.
It could be, that person could be wrong, but they agree with that person.
Yeah.
That's what matters most.
What are your do's and don'ts? Like, to someone, I would say you guys have had I know you'll be modest about it, but a lot of success. Like you said, most of your clients are from out of state. That's direct correlation with your success with social media and video. What are your do's and don'ts you would give to someone who's trying to get a brand off the ground?
I think it's very tempting, and we get approached. If I open my inbox right now, there's probably a dozen of emails from social media gurus, and the general progression, and I don't want to say negative things about everybody that's in that space, but there's a saying about those that don't know usually teach. So the do's is you want to be super consistent, and you need to learn from your own mistakes.
Yeah.
You need to deep dive into your analytics. And in our space, like content creation for real estate in particular, it's a very niche topic. So the life cycle of a follower could be limited by them accomplishing their goal, whether they relocate here and buy with us or buy with somebody else. Once you're living here, do you really care to know what somebody else has to say about what it's like to live here?
Sure.
So you have this shorter life cycle of an average subscriber to your channel, and they might like you and just might like to know the things that you bring to the table, but just gauging analytics of your videos and looking at your number of views and subscribers, it could send the wrong message. So like we found that some of our high converting videos that are, getting thousands of views right out of the gate aren't producing leads. People are watching them and they're sharing them and it's relevant information, but it's not enticing enough for them to pick up a phone and call us.
Yeah.
And going back to what I was saying about those that don't know, I usually teach. You get contacted as you get this off the ground, you start creating content and you start getting your first 100, 200 subscribers. Usually your information is out there on the internet, and there are so many companies that are trying to sell to you as a content creator, as a business owner, and they tell you we'll take you to the next level, we'll help your content convert. And often that promise could be partly true, where you're creating content that converts, but it doesn't produce leads.
Yeah.
Because it's usually not authentic. It's the same model that worked somewhere else, but is not unique to your market or even your personality. And anytime you try to pigeonhole yourself into being something you're not, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So you have to find things that are consistent. And even if they're consistently not working, you could learn from your own example and kind of go through the growth pains. I think that's probably true to any business. Just to give you some stats, in our market, and it's getting tough out there. So in 2024, over 65% of all real estate agents, and I think there were like 1,600 agents in our board, over 65% of these agents closed fewer than 4 transactions.
Yeah.
And
Same with mortgage lenders.
yeah, same with mortgage lenders.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah. A lot of people got retired. Keep going.
Oh, they're retired. Yeah. So, but it doesn't, I mean, a lot of people will listen to this and it'll be like a very discouraging thing. But I think that a lot of people got into this industry. A lot of people that got into this industry in the last 5 years just had it so easy for so long, where everybody is qualified, mortgage rates are super low. And if you bring in really just your ability to breathe air, you're able to produce. That has changed drastically. And in order to be good, you have to be exceptionally good. And I think with the supply of money in the economy and the willingness of people to exchange that money for goods and services,
Mike, will you grab the door? Keep going. It's just open a little bit.
it's really changing. The dynamic is changing, and I think it's good for the consumer, because I've hired some real estate agents in other markets to help us buy and sell.
Yeah.
And it's always like a self-reflection experience for me. Am I doing what this agent is doing for me?
Yeah.
Or am I doing more? And how do I feel about it? So I think like the customer service element, like once you attract somebody to do business with you, you also have to fulfill on your obligations.
Yes.
And
yeah.
the barrier of entry into real estate is set super low.
Mm-hmm.
Just about anybody could get a license. Just about anybody could get into business. But being a real estate licensee doesn't make you a business owner. And there are many, many avenues that you could take from that point. I mean, you could join a team. You could try to learn from, the soft skills that you have from being in another business or working for another company that may be transferable. There's really no recipe for success that's like gonna for sure work for somebody. I think it's kind of a great thing, actually.
How do you differentiate then? Like if there's so many people who can get into this, and you hinted at some systems and procedures and things like that you learned in the corporate world. How do you, besides your video and investing in that, like how do you organize your business and scale as a 1 or 2 person team and differentiate?
That's a great question. I think that I'm really grateful for over a decade of high level sales development and sales management for a large corporation. The interesting aspect of that is a lot of people get into real estate because they want the freedom to do what they want when they want. And that often overpowers their ability to deliver in that business. A lot of real estate agents go through peaks and valleys in their performance. It's really easy for somebody getting into it to make a six-figure income. Maybe not anymore, but it used to be.
Yeah.
And you close a couple of deals, you get a couple of great commission checks, go and buy yourself a boat, come off.
Yeah.
Take time off. You take time off from putting in the reps. You start talking to a new prospect. They don't like you. They turn off. So then you're back into the valley of getting nothing. And then people get fired up again because it's time to make a payment on that boat. Everything else.
Yeah.
And
Cycles.
support their lifestyle. So they're constantly going through these cycles. So I think getting back to, first of all, developing a lot of salespeople in my career in the past, that's what I was passionate about, is helping others succeed. There was nothing new that I ever preached, and you just have to cultivate successful behaviors and put in the reps. There's not a sexy business model where you just wake up to a client that is ready to engage with you, that is ready to put together a new deal and put bread on your table. I mean, that's excluding, this is just talking about nuts and bolts of the business. Of course, clients' interests always come first, and you have to provide great service. That comes without saying. That the client's priority comes way above any amount of money that you make from the transaction.
Yeah.
You have to recognize your own worth. But I guess going back to what makes people successful in this business, and there are, every top agent in this town has a very not sexy process. They go in the office and they put in the work every single day, regardless of how they feel. I think that if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to be consistent, you're willing to put in the reps, I don't care how broken your process is, eventually the process will get better. It's just like anything else. I mean, it's physical endurance, right? You continue to put in the reps, you get the results.
Yeah.
You course correct as you go along.
So I'm hearing a lot of like consistency and sticking with the fundamentals. Like there's not a get rich quick scheme to a lot of this. And I appreciate that, because I feel the same way when people people ask me, what do we do? What do we do? It's like, I'll tell you what to do, but it might be a couple years before it pays off for you.
Right. Well, and the same thing, I'm sure, in the storage business. Michonne is kind of funny. She's like, anybody that asks me about what we do to be successful, I'm an open book and I'm happy to share. And she's like, well, aren't you afraid that they're going to surpass you? I'm like, I will cheer for them to pass me, because that gives me more motivation to do better. I believe, well, first of all, anybody that gets into any kind of business ownership, entrepreneurship, or self-employment, the scarcity mindset is very detrimental, because you think that like every deal is the last deal.
Yeah.
This world is abundant, and you have to believe in that. And I think that people can be successful around you. And the other comforting thing is 98% of people are just not going to be consistent enough to create that competition. So I welcome everybody and anybody to get into this business and be successful, or any business for that matter. I feel like if I could ever benefit somebody else, even in my own industry, like I don't think that there is that little demand that, every new agent becomes competition. It's kind of funny to see people talk negatively as things begin to get a lot tougher. They're like, oh, great, these guys need to get out of the industry because these extra 5 deals a year that these 900 agents are closing, that could be more for us. It's like, if you feel that way, you should probably plan your exit strategy, because your thoughts are already so negative and so cloudy that you're probably too miserable to bring a lot of value. Like, I don't know, maybe that's too critical to think that way.
Well, I think it's so you're talking about abundance and scarcity mindset, and I think it's easy to say even when you're starting out, but I think as you go through business, you got a decade of business under your belt, your confidence is so high if you've been consistent and done what you say you're going to do, that you're right. Like, it's really not about, like, you're so confident in what you've done that only good can come from you serving others and like contributing, sharing, right? And there's different examples in real estate, or when people call me about a service business or a storage business. But I found, people oftentimes that's your future business partner. Like if you can get someone off the ground or provide them some value, and sometimes it'll backfire on you if you help someone out, but like a lot of times like life is long and things will come up where maybe they are your future business partner, or they make an introduction that really helped you later. And so providing value first is a big deal. And I would also say, like, if someone's willing to pay the price, like, props to them. I think when I first started out, it was a bigger concern of people, oh, this person's going to compete with me. But then after years of the, like, just with the moving company, like, it is not for the faint of heart. Like, you have to hire and train and fulfill, and you have to do so much. You have to pay through the nose for insurance and workers' comp
And fleet. You have to maintain your fleets. Things are constantly breaking.
When you go through a six-figure fleet, just six-figure fleet bill just for the insurance alone, and then the insurance company doesn't pay on their claim, you're like, yeah, I welcome anyone to experience this, and then if they can get through this, props to them. And then so like early on, like it was my actions, and like I was paying the price with like my actions, and that's what gave me confidence. Like, yeah, anyone who wants to do this, props to them if they can do these same actions. But then now as I'm scaling, like it's dollars. So I'm having to reinvest dollars back in my business that I'm skeptical that other people would be willing to do. Right? It's like I could either stay where I'm at and keep more discretionary income for me, or I can put a huge percentage back in the business. And I think a lot of people would get stalled out at the scaling process because of that. So I love that point.
You bring up an interesting point. I think the scaling part is universal to any business, whether it's storage business, service business, real estate business. At some point, once you, well, and going back to the other point about consistency, right? I think if you disconnect yourself from the outcome, if you just assume that this world is abundant and you're going to be successful, and you fall in love with the process, the grind, the reps, and you start putting in the reps, and instead of feeling sorry for yourself that, this fleet bill is expensive and insurance costs keep going up for this and that, and it's getting beat up from every direction, just kind of fall in love with the fact that, hey, we just survived another day in business.
Yeah.
And this is my motto. This is what I do. Eventually you turn around and you're like, oh, we've got this discretionary capital that we could reinvest. This is another kind of this is the part that intrigues me and also terrifies me at the same time, because I've seen people with discretionary capital make terrible decisions and go to zero faster than somebody that didn't have the capital. Because when you're starting the business, you're operating really lean where every dollar counts, and you put in more sweat equity and you show up to more places until eventually you get to this next fundamental challenge in your business as a business owner, where your time with the family and your time is more important, and you start to offset that time and protect it with more of that capital and more of the future investments. This is like where shiny things could get you in trouble.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I think you can, the bigger, obviously the bigger you go, the bigger problems you have, right? But we chase those problems and those challenges, because that's what's going to get us to the next level. These obstacles are barriers of entry to your competition. And if you can, I always like to, visualize, like one of my mantras is just taking punches. Because if you can take punches and get back up, that is the number one thing for success in life, in business, obviously in sports, finance, whatever their family or relationships. Like if you can take punches and get back up, you will be the winner at the end of the day, no matter your business. And so I think that's a really big a point to point out. I think it's exciting to think about all the growth. We've got a good picture of kind of your career. And I mean, is there any other maybe like, I like the fact that you're willing to speak out against what other experts or, thought leaders may say. Is there anything else that you would say to your former self, things that people are saying on the internet or elsewhere that's like, don't believe that, just stick with something else? Like, is there any bad advice that's out there right now?
There's lots of bad advice. In fact, I think that there's so much noise for somebody that's getting into real estate industry with unrealistic expectations. And it's not just real estate industry. I mean, anybody could launch a course. Like there's a whole idea that's being propelled all over the internet that like, hey, stop doing what you're doing. Stop your ordinary grind.
Yeah.
This is not sustainable. Your industry is going to fail. You should become a coach instead. How ridiculous is that statement? Like, if you're going to become a coach in a failing industry, is your product crap?
Yeah.
Because if you don't even believe in your own industry, but you just believe in a predatorial business of getting somebody to pay you the subscription just so that you can scale it, but that's just, not every coach is terrible. In fact, having a coach and having somebody who could help develop you could be very, very good for a lot of people and could be a good stepping stone to get your mindset to open to a different way of thinking, really. But I think that anybody that's getting into the real estate industry in particular should be very careful with where that advice comes from.
Yeah.
And eliminate the possibility of those that don't know teaching you. Like, in other words, if this coach is a professional educator that hasn't sold any real estate in his or her life, they may be really good at teaching, but is there any value to what they teach? Versus somebody that spent a lot of time in the trenches and brings you a case study for everything that they teach. Like, here's what you should do and here's why.
Yeah.
So you should be the why person. Why should I trust you? And why is this going to be successful? But don't become a white person so much so that you just get this paralysis of asking too many whys. Like, you have to be about 20% ready to execute. Like 80% of it is in the execution. You have to pick a line and figure out that this is going to be something that I'm going to give it a stab, and if it's not me, I can exit and I could try another strategy. But yeah, keep taking punches.
Yeah, I love that, man. We talked about kind of the past. We talked about what's right in front of your face today. What's your vision? Like, where are you going to go from here?
I'm going to create a course.
Hey, follow and subscribe to the course. Let's go.
That is actually one thing that I'm trying to avoid. It's interesting to see some of my peers and kind of the natural like real estate career progression.
Yeah.
First of all, I love doing what I do. And I've kind of questioned, like I have a lot of friends that some of them have already passed. Like I've met a lot of great people in this industry that have been in real estate for so long just because it's a people business. As your database grows, as your relationships grow, you focus more on serving the people and maybe less so on the grind. And you could scale this business up or down based on your lifestyle. It doesn't mean that you work any less hard. You just change the priorities a little bit. You could be a little bit more selective. Not everybody is your client. And as you progress in this career, you could be more selective with who you engage and who you refer.
Yeah.
It's a luxury, really, and it comes to very few. So I think there's ways to scale that business. And with so many people talking about AI and big corporate conglomerates kind of shaking up a lot of verticals as we know them, it's interesting to keep your options open. And I honestly couldn't tell you what would be the next step if my industry ended. But I know that I'm going to get up and throw another punch, and the skills, like everybody pays for education. And once you have a certain level of education, certain soft skills that you could do, they're transferable. It's tougher for AI to displace me now versus 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Tell me more about that. Like, you just hinted at the fact that the industry is, I mean, obviously the industry is threatened by AI, but you talked about the ending of an industry. Is that, I mean, how could that happen?
Well, don't get me started on a doomsday predictions. I could can go pretty far down rabbit hole. There's a lot of institutional buying and selling. There's a lot of big companies that have tried and failed. If you look at like the track record for AI in real estate, I would say it's not great.
Like Homey,
like Zillow.
they're out, right? They're done. Yeah.
I think they got repurchased.
Or they survive.
Okay. There's a certain form of what's left of Homey. I don't know enough to give you accurate information.
Anyways.
I know. Yeah, like that model didn't work out well for them in the end.
Yeah.
Early 2000, not early 2000, early 2020s, Zillow and Redfin and a lot of these iBuyers were buying real estate based on their automated underwriting guidelines for their purchases, and it cost them billions of dollars.
Yeah.
But anything that has backing of big companies like BlackRock, they can afford to lose money and they can afford to hold that inventory. And this is a machine that's learning, and there are brains behind the machine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be reckless to completely discredit that and to think of life in general as if it's a road that never ends.
Yeah.
Like everything does evolve, everything does come to an end. I don't know if there will be a time when the entire home buying or selling process becomes something you just do online.
Yeah.
I'm sure at some point the milkman thought that career would never end, and everybody likes the personal touch with milk deliveries, but technology has a way of changing things.
Well, I think I love to hear that you're not burying your head in the sand, that you're aware of the threat. And honestly, like, I think whoever is ahead of the technology, just like you were ahead with content, it's like whoever is not scared of AI, whoever leans into it, they're going to be able to manipulate that technology to keep their business going. And it could fundamentally change how the business works, but you're already in it. And that's something like my team right now is, we're introducing AI into our business, and it scares the crap out of me because I'm like, the biggest thing that I want is just the quality to always be top notch. Right. And so, like, even having an AI, we're going to have humans take our calls during the day, but like in the middle of the night, if someone calls at midnight, we want an AI person to answer the call. And so, but even that is just like a threat to me. But I know in my heart that if I don't lean into this, if I don't, try my hand at and let my team loose on some of these AI tools, we'll get left behind. And so it's good to hear like your perspective on that, and it's good to hear kind of your mindset as things go forward. How about this? This is the Bigger Life podcast. My question to you is, what advice would you give someone who has that desire that I feel like we all have, to live a bigger life?
That's a great question. I feel like I've challenged myself with that a long time ago, and I still do every single day. As you reconcile your thoughts at the end of the day, like the bigger life in general, it could be something that morphs and shifts in your brain. Like what does that mean to you right now? And are you living a bigger life currently? And what is it going to take for you to be there? I think it's important to have that conversation, that open internal dialogue, right? Like as you look at things and you maybe finish a tough week, a tough day, and you reconcile. And to me, currently, that's showing up for my family. 20 years ago, that meant something totally different. 20 years from now, it'll probably still be showing up for my family, but in what way, in what capacity? Because these priorities change. And
Yeah.
being in an industry that I'm in, it's very interesting how I just turned 38 in March, and these things are starting to become very different in my brain. Like, in your 20s, you feel like there's just still so much life left.
Yeah.
In your early 30s, you're like, I'm still practically in my 20s. You kind of forget that you're no longer in your 20s. And as you get to your late 30s, and I know anybody that's listening to this right now that's like in their 50s and 60s is like, shut up, you're
I
still
know.
a baby.
It's like when you call someone old in front of your in-laws who are older than that person you call old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, as you think about this, as this thing evolves, I think that bigger life is just having more life in general, like spend more time living and be in the moment, be connected to what you're doing, and not just go through the motions. Even though we talked about throwing the punches and putting in the reps, your life has to be meaningful. It has to have meaning. If you hate doing what you do, even if it's very lucrative, you should really have that dialogue open with self-reflecting and figuring out how to actually live life instead of just trying to survive. And a lot of people focus so much on silly materialistic things, and the idea of thriving to them means X amount of zeros in their bank account, hopefully after a number, not before. Uh, Certain assets, certain realistic and unrealistic goals. I think it's good to have all of these things, but I have so many friends that have forgotten about living life and they focus on these tangible things that could really turn into a sandcastle that gets washed away.
Yeah.
I've been through some crazy health complications in the past. My wife has dealt with some just recently, and I think that like your mental, physical health is very important. Your spiritual connection, whatever you may believe in or not believe in, having that connection across, there's like almost like a list of things that you have to reconcile. And as we get busy, if you have kids, you're running a business, maybe you're working somewhere that is very taxing and challenging. Usually, you tend to put yourself last, especially if you're accomplishing things. But you could, you have to, when the oxygen masks on the airplane drop down, you have to put yours on first.
Yeah.
So you can take care of others. So being able to reconcile these things and figure out, where do I stand versus my goals? Am I going towards them or away from them? Are my goals just a joke? Like, are they only important to me? Having that analytical perspective on where you are versus where you want to be, I think is the beauty of it, because that's kind of like the meaning of life. Like it's evolving, it's changing.
Love it, man. I hear a lot of just focusing on what's most important. Obviously, the bigger life, we're trying to strive for greatness in all areas, but if your priority is your family and, living a fulfilling life, like those financial things are always going to take second chair. So I appreciate that. We can't thank you enough for coming on, man. I think everyone got a ton of value out of today. It's fun for me to hear like your journey, where you came from, why you act the way you do, and why you carry yourself out in business the way that you do, and get inside the mind of Nick a little bit. So thanks for being here, man.
Appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. I hope it really, some of these long-winded thoughts, hopefully they brought somebody some value.
Someone out there is looking for what you said today, so we'll try to find them and put the words with the listener. And yeah, it was another amazing episode of the Bigger Life podcast. Thanks.